Welcome to the Depth of Field podcast, where film, video, and animation professionals discuss the art of their craft and realities of the industry. Today on the show, we have an audio magician who does sound design and even records dialogue for AAA games and makes music. He's going to give us some practical advice for getting better audio out of our own productions and give us a peek behind the curtain to his process. Okay, then let's turn it up. Hey guys, I'm here with Jeff Moberg, who is a sound designer and music maker based in Toronto. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
This is awesome. So it doesn't have to be a secret. We work together on a lot of motion graphics projects, and there's a lot of motion graphics in your portfolio. It seems like you've almost become a go-to for that type of work. How do you think that ended up happening?
You know what? I've always really enjoyed working on animations and motion graphics videos. I just find in terms of sound, it's really open to creativity, and you can go way outside the box or keep it realistic. And I just like that kind of creative freedom that comes with it.
Yeah, that's so true. There's more abstract things going on and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And I've also, growing up with a brother that is in the animation field and is a 3D artist, I've always had a deep appreciation for what goes into it. So I really enjoy it.
Well, let's take a few steps back and just hear how you got started in audio in general, like how that whole career started for you.
It's funny, I kind of stumbled into it, actually. I had always been involved in music in some way, and throughout high school I was always playing in different bands and stuff like that. But I was fortunate to have parents that were always very encouraging and supportive of they would always push us to do exactly what we wanted to do. So coming out of high school, I really wanted to record bands. I wanted to work in a studio and record albums and mix music and stuff like that. So I ended up going to a college in Ottawa to study that. And during that time, we spent 1 week during the curriculum that was focused on film sound. Mm-hmm. And that was like an eye-opener for me. Like, I didn't even know at that point that Foley was a thing, and replacing dialogue and stuff like that. So that was a real, that was the time where I kind of stepped back and said, this is what I want to do, and this is where I want to go. So after that year, I moved to Toronto and studied audio post-production, and that led to an internship, and I just kind of spiraled out from there.
And what type of work was that? Was that already getting into motion graphics work, or was it more live action stuff?
No, it was more commercial based at that point.
Okay.
So we were recording a lot of voiceovers, mixing commercials, working on TV shows and cleaning up audio and stuff like that. And that's kind of where I got started in the post-production field, and then it kind of branched out from there. Okay.
So then did you end up targeting motion graphics customers, or did you start telling people hey, let me add sound effects to your motion graphics pieces? Or how did you get into becoming such a force in that style?
In our field, I think, and any creative field for that matter, I think there's a general consensus that we all just want to make cool stuff. We want to make something fun. We want to make something engaging that we enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. So when I first started out, it was really just reaching out to different studios and finding videos that I found really impressive and really engaging, and reaching out and just saying, here's what I do, and I think we can work together and make something cool. And I was fortunate that a few studios have reached out, and that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember when I was looking for sound designer, I think you were one of the first people I came across on Vimeo, and you just seemed like the go-to guy. And I have to give you props. You're almost, I think you are the perfect freelancer in the sense that working with you will never be a letdown. You just hit the mark every time, and the first time. So that's such a good reputation to have. And I know that helps you land more work because you know what's up, and you're executing all the time.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
So how would you describe the process for people that maybe aren't familiar with the type of motion graphics work and the sounds? Maybe they haven't noticed the sounds in the way that you do. How would you describe that process? When you're given an animation that has no sound, and then you have to start giving it all that life. And
Right.
like, what's that process like?
I think first and foremost is to take a step back and think about what the message is. Like, what is the client trying to convey to the audience? And then from there, you can kind of decide what the sound is going to bring to the table to actually support that and support the visuals that are there. Usually I'll take a look at the animatic or the rough cut or whatever stage the video is at, and then decide, is there sounds that I need to go out and record? Is there Foley that needs to be done? Is it going to be sound effects driven? Is it going to be music driven? And you can kind of narrow it down from there and start doing some tests and seeing what works.
Right. And I assume you've been doing it long enough that you have a pretty good understanding in terms of all of your existing sounds and the library and the way that they're organized. Was that something that was tricky to do, and is that always changing, or at this point do you have a pretty full library of sounds that you can lean back on, that you just know where they are?
Yeah, I mean, I have a library here that I've built up throughout the years, and field recordings that I've cataloged, and it's great to have on hand for different projects, but it's always nice to introduce new sounds into the mix as well.
Yeah.
And the same goes for music. Like, there's so many great companies that are popping up that are developing state-of-the-art virtual instruments and sound design tools that twist and morph audio in ways that we haven't heard before. So it's always good to kind of stay on top of it and keep fresh. And
a lot of these spots, you're giving sounds to like technology, which is really interesting because those sounds just don't exist. So that was an interesting thing. I remember working with you at the beginning and watching your spots, is like you would give sound to data moving, or like messages being sent, but not like a text message, but like just radio waves and things like that, which is super abstract, but it's really helpful in terms of like feeling what's going on.
Yeah,
in spots.
For sure.
So on the opposite end of the spectrum, you're also working. You mentioned doing work on A-list video games and recording character sounds. So I'd love to talk. Just give people a glimpse. I know you can't reveal studios and the game titles, but just giving a glimpse into what it's like in that process, because I know that's totally different than working with a studio on motion graphics, because there's a whole different process involved. Yeah,
for sure. It's definitely a different process. I would say it's a little less linear than working on something like a commercial or an online video or something like that. But one thing I'm always blown away with is the actors on some of these games. Like, it's unbelievable to watch. It'll be like a Monday morning and no one in the room has had coffee, and you tell them, okay, you're being blown up, and boom, like they're in it. Like, it's unbelievable to watch. But yeah, there's a lot of lines, and it's usually a lot of fun.
That's cool. So what would are you going in and like setting up the microphone and just making sure that everything sounds perfect and somebody else is directing the actors?
Yeah, pretty much. Like watching the levels so that there's no distortion or extra sounds in the sound booth that affect the performance, and just generally making sure it's a nice clean recording that they can work with once they get the files back on their end.
Right. Okay. So let's assume there's people listening that don't have a lot of experience doing sound design, and they're trying to add some flavor. They're not able to outsource or hire somebody like you. But what kind of advice would you give to somebody who, let's like in a wide variety of projects, but like what general advice in terms of sound design and giving the audio some life could you give? Like just some basic pointers.
If you're talking about bringing a scene to life, I would say just think about the layers that make up a scene, right? For instance, if you're talking about an outdoor scene set at a park, there's going to be some subtle wind noise. There's going to be, grass blowing, people walking by. Is there kids playing in the distance? Is there a dog barking?
Yeah.
All these things kind of add up to collectively make a scene a whole. Now, if you want to alter the mood of the scene, let's say it's a horror movie that's set in a park.
Right.
Maybe you want to, strip away all the life and just have like a cold wind or something that lends to the storyline. So I would just say think about the layers that are involved in a scene and the message that you want to convey with it.
Yeah, totally. Where would somebody who doesn't have any sound effects right now, like what would be their first stepping point? I remember when I was starting, I was using a website called freesound.org where people just upload recorded sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend something different or anything else?
I mean, yeah, that's kind of what's good about the time that we're in right now is recording devices, whether it be for video, photography, or audio, or otherwise. They're so readily available to us, and they're easy to get your hands on. And you start to see resources like that pop up. One site I really like is called Sonus.com.
Okay.
And they've done a great job of kind of curating independent sound libraries from all over the world. So if you're looking for something super specific, you can kind of browse through there, and chances are you'll find something that'll work. Yeah, otherwise I would just say, hire a sound designer. But, I'm just putting that out there.
Have you heard of motionsound.io?
Yeah.
A friend of mine recorded those, and there's a lot of good sounds in there too for motion graphics specifically.
Yeah, I mean it's a great resource to have in your arsenal, and apart from that, if you really want to dive into it, like portable recorders are fairly affordable, and it'd be great to get out there and record, right? Why not? Get your own flavor on it.
Right. So you have a background in music, which makes a lot of sense being an audio person. How has that, shaped how you work as a sound designer, and how has that balance been? Because you're obviously still pursuing music and you record music.
Right.
You have some cool samples on your website. So what's that like doing both, and in terms of maintaining that creative passion and still working on that type of stuff?
Well, I mean, like one of the benefits of doing both is that, and coming from a musical background, is that when you approach a new sound design project, you're thinking about it in a musical way.
Yeah.
So when I'm designing sound effects, I'm always thinking about what the music track is doing, and vice versa as well. When I'm writing a music track, I'm always thinking about what the sound effects are doing,
right,
in certain points, and trying to think about how they can work together. So when I'm designing sounds, I'm always trying to work in melodic elements or different instruments to try to create sounds so that they sit well with the music. And the two can kind of form like a cohesive whole.
Right. Yeah. So what is your inspiration like when you do write music, or when you were writing personal stuff? Like, what was the inspiration behind it?
I would say a lot of the inspiration actually comes from the video itself, to be honest.
Right.
When you watch back a new project, it's figuring out, is there certain cues that need to be hit? Is there a certain storyline that, the client wants the music to accentuate, and different things like that. So I would say a lot of the inspiration actually comes from the video. And I kind of let that dictate where the music goes from there.
Okay. One thing I really respect about working with you is the simplicity of your rates, because I'm definitely an advocate for flat rates and things that are just easy to keep consistent in terms of the deliverables.
Right.
Because I know that's not common for a lot of creative service people.
Right. I mean, I know a lot of people that bill out in all sorts of ways, whether it be hourly or day rates or flat rates.
Yeah.
I think it's, whatever you're most comfortable with. But, I think a big part of being a freelancer is being easy to work with. And if you can simplify things for your client and, quote with a number that you're confident you can deliver within, then it just speeds the whole process up and simplifies things for both you and the client. You can move on to the more creative, fun stuff, right?
Well, one thing, like the reason I stray away from the day rate structure is that you don't always know what you can accomplish in a day. And especially the client doesn't always know. Like, you have a better idea of what you could do in a day,
yeah,
but the client might not actually have a good idea. And it almost puts the pressure on them to figure out what could be done. Whereas when you're giving a flat rate, you're telling me that you can deliver that set. Like, you can do the project and you're sure that you'll get it done and you'll still make a profit on it, which is encouraging.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that comes down to knowing your process well enough so that you can gauge how much time you need to deliver something. But, it definitely varies by project, and I can understand, why you would want to take a day rate or an hourly rate. If the client's looking for a super specific sound, or maybe the project's a super abstract and you need to build in some time for experimentation, I can totally understand why someone would want a day rate or an hourly rate to kind of cover their bases so that they're not spending a month on something that they thought would take a week. So it definitely varies by the project.
Yeah. How would you describe the sound audio industry in general? Do you notice competitors, or do you feel like there's just a lot of friendly natured people. Like it seems like that's how I would describe the motion graphics community. Is there's a lot of friendly people, and is the sound design industry any different, or what's your experience been in there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's really similar actually, and it's one of the things I love about the industry is how tight everybody is.
Yeah.
You know, you see on Twitter and Vimeo every day where someone puts out an awesome new project, and there's almost like a virtual high five from the industry where it's like people are genuinely appreciative of it and you know, curious about techniques and willing to share and learn from each other.
Yeah.
And I think it's really similar in the sound industry where, you know, like I have a group of people that I work with pretty regularly and people that I look up to where, you know, we'll bounce ideas off each other and send each other projects and say, you know, like, what do you think about this mix? And you know, is there something I could do differently? And I think it's really important to kind of share ideas and learn from each other and, you know, help the industry grow.
Yeah.
You know?
Out of curiosity, have you ever sold stock music? Like that's become so popular. Like, have you ever created a track and then sold it on a site like Premium Beat or something like that?
You know what? When I first started out, I definitely explored that option, and I realized pretty quickly that I didn't really enjoy it.
What bothered you about it?
There was just something about, you know, kind of randomly writing a track and putting it out there into the abyss and hoping it sells and not really having control over where it goes that I just didn't really enjoy.
Right.
You know, I think for me personally, I enjoy the challenge of writing to visuals and taking a direction and kind of putting my own flavor on it that I didn't find that kind of satisfaction in writing stock music and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, well, it makes sense based on what you said about being inspired by the visuals, because like when you're writing a music track like that, you're trying to give it a bunch of feeling and you have no context to what or how it's going to be used. You're trying to guess a need and then create for that, opposed to seeing the need and then creating a solution.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about motion graphics and working in that arena, but how would you describe the difference when you compare like the process of motion graphics to commercial? Like what are the key differences in the workflow?
To be honest, I mean, I would say they're both pretty similar.
Okay.
And actually a lot of the commercials that I work on are animations and motion graphics and 3D videos. So the two do go hand in hand.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One thing I would say is more common, or I see more commonly with motion graphics and animators, is that a lot of the time you end up working alongside the animator. And I mean, in an ideal world, as a composer and a sound designer, like we would get like a final cut or like a locked edit where nothing changes. But you know, with animations and 3D videos, things are constantly being refined, and you know, transitions are being shifted here and there and you know, tweaked. So when you're writing a music track or creating sound effects, like you have to be kind of mindful that, you know, a shot could be removed or an edit could change at any point, and you know, kind of create a track that is flexible in that sense, if that makes any sense.
Okay. So how has it been managing your freelance life in terms of like work-life balance and just managing all of your clients and the whole business side of freelance? Like how's that been for you?
You know, it's been both satisfying and challenging at the same time. Like there was a bit of a learning curve there, right?
Yeah.
I would say, you know, when you do something that you really enjoy or you do something that you love for a living, it's very easy to kind of let it take over.
Yeah.
So it took a long time to get that work-life balance in check. But when you first start out as a freelancer, it's absolutely terrifying. Like you don't know where the next project is going to come from, and you've got rent to pay and bills to pay and so on. But
yeah, totally.
When you take a step back and you know, realize that you've kind of carved your own little pocket in the industry, and things have become steady, and you know, you have that balance of the business side of things and the creative side of things, it's pretty awesome, and you can, you know, it's something to be proud of, and you know, it's satisfying.
Yeah. So you work with I assume a wide variety of clients. Like you have a lot of studios listed on your website. Is there a wide variety of working relationships? Like, so for instance, when I'm sending you an animation, I don't really give you direction because I trust your creativity and you always nail it. Is that similar to other people, or are they giving you a direction and is there more of a process in figuring out the sound, or is it normally just kind of a, hey, here's a video and put some sounds on it?
I mean, it's different for each project, and sometimes you have full creative freedom, and other times there's a brief that you kind of have to stick to that's been put together by a full creative team and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
there's definitely pros and cons to both. Like it's nice to have creative freedom and be able to experiment with certain things and kind of play around with it and find a groove. But sometimes it's good to have a challenge where it's like, this is what we need and this is what we're looking for, and find a way to make it happen.
Okay. Let's see if we can give our listeners a technical tip that, let's say up until now, they've kind of ignored the audio side. Like they just kind of slap on some stock music and they don't adjust their voiceover at all, which I've been guilty of when I first started doing tutorials. What is like some easy things they can do with no real experience to just make their audio sound better, even if it's just voiceover and music?
I would say just make sure they're balanced and that you can clearly understand what the voiceover is saying, and the music isn't drowning it out. And one thing that goes a long way for that is just making sure that you're starting with a high quality file.
Yeah.
If you're working with this MP3 that the voiceover artist recorded on their phone in a garage, it's just not going to translate. It's one of those things where video and audio, it's 50% and 50%. If you have one that's bad and one that's good, it's not going to translate to the audience.
Yeah.
You can have a blockbuster movie that was filmed with hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment. If the audio is poorly recorded and poorly mixed, you're going to lose the audience regardless. So I would just say, make sure you're starting with the highest quality possible, and then just, make sure that the voiceover and the music are balanced,
Cool. Well, speaking of music, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask what your favorite type of music is now, and any artist, if you feel like listening to.
That is a loaded question.
The impossible question.
Yeah. I'll listen to pretty much anything except country. I'm just not a fan of the twang, but I listen to a lot of electronic, but I'll listen to anything from jazz to indie, folk, rock, metal, 90s hip hop. Like, I kind of bounce around depending on the day, but
yeah, I'm the same way. Every day I love blasting music when I'm in the shower, and I'll switch genres almost every day between blues, jazz, or electronica, or rock. I mean, there's just so much good stuff out there. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, oddly enough, like I don't listen to a lot of jazz, but my all-time favorite band is a jazz band called Snarky Puppy.
Nice.
And I've seen them live so many times, and it's always just amazing to see. Another band I really like is an electronic band. I won't say their full name because I know we're trying to keep this PG, but they're called Holy F. And I highly recommend checking them out. And yeah.
Is there anywhere specific that you get inspiration from for the sound design aspect of your work? Do you visit some people that you look up to, or do you watch other videos, or how do you get inspired?
For sure. I mean, seeing videos and whether it's a behind the scenes video on how something was done or how sound was created for like a feature film or something like that is always inspiring, and it gives you an insight into, someone else's mindset and outlook on sound and that sort of thing. But I find hanging out with other creatives is a huge it makes a huge impact into how you think about what you're doing. And hanging out with whether it's musicians or other sound designers or designers, illustrators, animators, like all that sort of thing. We all have personal projects and ideas that we want to act on, and I think sitting down and talking about those ideas is huge, and you end up coming back and your wheels are turning, and to have those brainstorm sessions, it kind of opens up your mind and kind of makes you think differently and how to approach things differently, and that can translate into how I approach the next sound design project and things like that.
What's something you notice about those people you're looking up to that they do that, like, what's the reason you're looking up to them? What do you see in their work?
I think it's just, it's the habit of holding yourself to a higher standard and doing more and doing it better, like making sure it's absolutely perfect,
In what aspect? Like in the actual, like you can tell that they custom made these sounds for these environments type of a thing, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's diving into the details and thinking differently and taking different approaches to making sounds and creating these sounds that no one's ever heard before. And
Yeah.
they're fresh and new and unique,
Yeah. They're not using stock sounds.
Yeah.
They're like custom making the stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it's it's using the tools that you have to come up with new ways of creating sounds, right? Like it's learning those new techniques and kind of inventing new techniques to come up with these.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's insane how many new techniques and ways to pull off that technique there can be.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I see that all the time in people's work.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and start wrapping it up. And before we do that, like one thing I like to ask every visitor is what's something our listeners should focus on to improve this week? And we did cover some really nice, simple things that they can do to make their audio better. But so maybe departing from like a technical piece of advice, but
Yeah.
just something that might make them a better freelancer or might help them pursue better sound, or just something that's a practical tip you can give them.
I would say, dialing back to what we were talking about before is just always be experimenting and making time to learn new techniques and also surround yourself with people you admire. Reach out, whether it's over Twitter or Facebook or, going out for a coffee or a beer or whatever. And don't be afraid to ask questions and seek out the feedback that you need that will take your work to the next level.
Awesome. Yeah, don't get too complacent in your style.
Yeah, exactly. The moment you find yourself in a routine, that's when you stop learning. And when you stop learning, that's when you're at a standstill and you fall behind. So I guess, the challenge would be to put the effort in and dive into the details and take the time you need to make your work something you can be proud of.
Love that. All right, cool, man. Well, before I let you go, do you have any sites or social media you want to plug where people could just check out your work or get in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure. My website is jeffmoberg.tv, and you can always contact me through there. And you can find me on Twitter and other social media at jm_sound_music.
Awesome. So we'll put those links in the show notes as well as the recommended sound effects sites that you guys can check out. And Jeff, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. That was awesome.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm super excited about that episode. My videos just kind of sucked before I met Jeff because he added the audio life, and I love that. And he gave us some real practical tips there. So I hope that it helps you. Thank you for listening to the podcast. It's wonderful having you here. An important note, this podcast is sponsored by Plot, the fastest way to create and share storyboards. Guys, if you work on any type of a video project, I'm sure it'll save you a lot of time. So create your free account at theplot.io. All the notes and the related links mentioned in the episode will also be available on Plot's website at theplot.io/006. So thanks again for listening. I hope to see you again next time, and I hope you have an awesome week.